Well, without a sense of meaning or purpose, it's really hard to be motivated. I think most of us understand this through our own experience at work. Now, for many people, work that has meaning and purpose is more important than the pay. Some people will do work for lower pay because it's work that has meaning and purpose. Now, other people will endure work that has absolutely no meaning or purpose just for the pay. But imagine if you were doing work that had no meaning, no purpose, and no pay. Well, that's where a lot of students are at. They're not getting paid. And without meaning, without purpose in their studies, many students just get by, and some not even that. And when it comes to school, there's really no shortage of what to learn. The shortage is why. Now, a really great teacher is one who can impart the why as well as the what. A great teacher is someone who can help the students to internally connect the dots in a way that makes sense to them, that brings meaning to the work they're doing, and that goes beyond getting a good grade or bringing home a nice report card or getting into college. Now, in the last session, we introduced a practical tool that helps students to contextualize their work. That tool was called the Activity Contextualizer. And in this session, we want to present another very practical tool called the Awesome Activator. Now this tool helps students to see their work not only in the context of something much bigger than the work itself, to help them to see that they're building a cathedral and not laying bricks, but this tool goes a step further. It actually moves the students towards action steps. It's not enough just to see it a certain way. You want to move them to certain action steps that align with that seeing. So the Awesome Activator, it's a 2-page mind mapping exercise. If you're an educator, you know what mind mapping is all about. The first page looks like this, and at the top you'll find some instructions. It says, first, think of an activity, a project, a task, or a work that you want to contextualize with the bigger picture of a biblical worldview, and write this activity inside the bubble shown at the center of the box below. Here's the circle, and let's put an activity in there. And I've chosen an activity that I think all of you do, washing dishes. So what we're going to do is contextualize dishwashing. We want to look beyond the dishes to a bigger picture that will help to bring meaning to that work. Now, the next step is to brainstorm. It's a mind map, so there's no logic or order to this. You just want to think about 5 or 6 ways that washing dishes connects with the bigger picture. I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but this is intentionality here. So you take that other tool called the questions for contextualizing activities, the one you can get on the Coram Deo website. Read through that list and just see which ones of those questions prompt connecting points with washing dishes. And just write those around dishwashing in bubbles, okay? And connect them with lines to dishwashing, just like you see on the screen. Now remember, it's a mind map exercise. There's no order of thought. You and your students are brainstorming. You're going through the list, thinking about questions. And let's, for example, give you a few questions here to think about. For example, in the purpose section, it says, how does dishwashing relate to the great commandment of Mark 12:30-31, about loving God and loving your neighbors yourself? How does dishwashing connect to that? Well, one of the bubbles might say, I am to love my neighbor as myself, and this includes my family members. Now, there's another question that says, how is God's will being done on earth today through dishwashing? And you might write this in the bubble. God wants his will to be done on earth, including dishes to be cleaned. I presume you feel that's God's will. And he works through ordinary people to accomplish that in the earth. And if you go through the list, you'll see other questions, like questions that have to do with gifts and abilities. I have been given gifts and abilities by God for the purpose of blessing and serving others, and that can be accomplished at the kitchen sink. That's where discipleship really happens. That's where you're living out the biblical worldview. But the question is, do you see how it connects? You can say, I want to do all my work heartily as for the Lord. By the way, that's from Colossians 3. You know who Paul was writing Colossians 3:2 when he said, do your work as unto the Lord? He was writing to slaves who, by the way, had no choice over what work they were doing. They did what their masters told them to do. And Paul says, look, recognize that your real master is Christ. And wash those dishes as unto the Lord, which means, translated in my head, means I want to wash these dishes as though Christ will eat on them at the next meal. Okay? I'm driving a taxi. I want to drive that taxi as though the Lord is my passenger. I'm driving a bus. I see, okay, I want to drive the bus as though Christ, I want to do it as unto him, as though he's the one I'm really serving. Okay? It just makes a whole different way of thinking about your work, which is not mundane at all. If it's legitimate service, it's God's work. You're ruling over rubber tires and gas and engines, and you're serving people, and that's God's work. You're loving God with all your strength when you wash a pot and a pan. Now, the next step, step 3, which is the one we're on now, it says this: write down some specific ways you could apply the biblical worldview connections to your activity, that you could apply those bubble thoughts to washing dishes. Talk it over with a friend, pray about it, think outside the box, and then write those down as I could statements. These are visionary I could statements. Here's the way one person did it. I could wash dishes as an act of loving service to my family. I could do that. It could be a direct expression of my love for those who are closest to me. I could wash dishes as an act of service to God himself and as a fulfillment of his cultural commission to govern over water and soap and cups and plates. Think about that. What could you do? It's visionary. And then step 4, you have to think about, well, if that's going to happen, what preparation do I have to take? Is there some training I need? Is there some research I need to do? What do I have to do to be successful in that vision? And then you write that down. You're intentional about it. And the person who did this exercise said, well, I really must be convinced that dishwashing is the will of God for me. I must be convinced that he really wants me to do this as an expression of his will being done on earth as it is in heaven through me. And this person said, I must be conscious of the fact that when I'm washing dishes, I'm doing work God wants done. And I have to bear in mind that when I'm washing dishes, I'm doing it as though He's going to eat on them. And I must realize that I'm washing dishes to serve God and people. That's what this person felt. That's the adjustment this person felt that he needed to do in order to contextualize that activity. And the last step now is the action step. This is where you bring it down to, okay, what now? If all of this is true, does all of this make sense to me? How then shall I live? What difference does it make? What action steps? Well, this person wrote this down. I will put a little sign near my sink that reads, "Here I directly serve God and love others. I'm fulfilling my role of governing over the material world." Now that might sound silly to you, but this is what would help this person to remember what they're doing at that sink. It was an action step. And then this person said, I'll use my dishwashing time as a time of practical discipleship. I'll put my faith into action here in a very real and practical way. And I'll wash dishes regularly and consistently without complaining in a timely and organized fashion. Pretty good, I think. Now, you parents that are watching, you might want to do this exercise with your kids, your teenage kids at home. See what happens. You get the idea. Now, the same approach can be used with any activity that a student does, whether it's learning to read, solving math problems, writing a short story, doing a research project, or playing soccer. It's all about intentionality. It's about thinking through the ramifications. It's about being specific enough to write them down. It's about putting your work into the context of that bigger picture, which brings extraordinary meaning to ordinary work. Now, I have one more session, and in this final session, I want to actually introduce you to some educators who are actually doing what I've described to you. I want to talk with them about their experiences in the classroom and the effects that it's having on the way their students are thinking and how it's sifting into the home. And we will do some interviews of these teachers. And then I'm going to conclude with some recommendations for teachers in state schools.